Walking through the revolving glass doors of tech-forward solutions, I adjusted my blazer and felt the familiar weight of my laptop bag against my shoulder. The marble lobby gleamed under the morning sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, and for a moment, I paused to take it all in. 18 months ago, I had walked out of this same building carrying a cardboard box of personal items and tears I refused to let fall. Today, I was walking back in as someone completely different. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The security guard at the front desk looked up with a professional smile as I approached. "Good morning. I'm here for my first day. Sarah Chen." I watched as he typed my name into the system, his fingers moving efficiently across the keyboard. The temporary consultant badge he handed me felt light in my palm, almost insignificant compared to what I knew was waiting for me upstairs. The plastic rectangle read Sarah Chen, Consultant, Level 2 Access, in standard black lettering, giving no hint of the storm that was about to sweep through the 28th floor. As I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the marketing department on the 15th floor, my reflection stared back at me from the polished steel doors. The woman looking back was different from the one who had left. Gone was the uncertainty that had plagued me during those final weeks before my maternity leave. In its place stood someone who had spent the last 12 months not just raising a beautiful daughter, but quietly orchestrating one of the most strategic career moves in corporate history. My dark hair was pulled back in a sleek bun. My navy suit was perfectly tailored, and my eyes held a confidence that came from knowing exactly what was about to unfold. The elevator climbed steadily, each floor bringing me closer to a confrontation 18 months in the making. I thought about Emma, my 8-month-old daughter, who was probably just waking up in her crib at home. Tom would be getting her ready for daycare, the same routine we had established over the past few weeks as I prepared for this moment. Everything had been planned meticulously, from the childcare arrangements to the strategic timing of my return. The elevator dinged softly as it reached the 15th floor, and I stepped out into the familiar hallway that led to the marketing department. The carpet was the same deep blue I remembered, and the motivational posters about innovation and teamwork still lined the walls. But something felt different about the energy in the air. There was a tension, a sense of anticipation that seemed to ripple through the conversations happening in nearby cubicles. As I made my way toward the temporary desk that had been assigned to me, I caught fragments of whispered conversations between colleagues. "Did you hear about the big announcement today?" one voice said. "Something about restructuring," another replied. "Monica's been in meetings all week with the board." The mention of her name sent a familiar chill down my spine, but it was quickly replaced by a warm satisfaction. Monica Williams had no idea what was coming. I settled into my temporary workspace, a modest desk positioned strategically in the open floor area, with a perfect view of Monica's corner office. The irony wasn't lost on me as I unpacked my laptop and a simple notebook, playing the part of a returning consultant who was grateful for any opportunity. Through the glass walls of her office, I could see Monica on a phone call, her gestures animated as she spoke. She looked exactly the same as the day I left, confident, commanding, and completely unaware that her world was about to change forever. The morning sun cast long shadows across the office floor as I began my performance. I opened my laptop and pulled up some basic marketing reports, documents that any entry-level consultant might review on their first day. My fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying the events that had led to this moment. 18 months ago, I had been one of Tech Forward's most promising marketing strategists. I had spearheaded campaigns that brought in millions of dollars in new business, developed innovative strategies that our competitors tried desperately to replicate, and built relationships with clients that were the envy of the entire department. But when I walked into Monica's office to discuss my pregnancy and upcoming maternity leave, everything changed. The memory was still crystal clear. Monica had been sitting behind her mahogany desk, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the surface as I explained my situation. "Well, Sarah?" she had said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I suppose congratulations are in order. But we both know what this means for your career trajectory." Her words had hit me like a physical blow, but she wasn't finished. Motherhood changes women. It softens them, makes them lose their edge. You'll come back distracted, tired, and frankly, less committed to excellence. I've seen it happen too many times. I had tried to protest, to assure her that my dedication to my work wouldn't waver, but Monica had held up a hand to silence me. "The clients won't wait for you to figure out work-life balance, Sarah. The campaigns won't pause for soccer games and school plays. This industry requires 100% focus, and mothers simply can't give that." She had leaned back in her chair, studying me with the cold calculation of someone who had never questioned her own assumptions. "I'm not saying you can't have a career and a family, but expecting to maintain your current trajectory? That's simply unrealistic." The conversation had continued for another 20 minutes, each word carefully chosen to make me understand that my future at Tech Forward was limited. Monica had painted a picture of a woman who would return from maternity, leave to find herself sidelined, passed over for promotions, and gradually phased out of important projects. "It's not personal," she had insisted. "It's just business reality." That night, I had gone home to Tom and cried tears of frustration and anger. But somewhere between the tears and the sleepless hours that followed, something had shifted inside me. Instead of accepting Monica's vision of my future, I began to plan a different one entirely. During my maternity leave, while Monica assumed I was lost in a haze of diapers and sleepless nights, I was actually building the foundation for the most strategic career move of my life. I reached out to former colleagues who had moved to other companies, strengthened relationships with clients who had always valued my work, and most importantly, I began having quiet conversations with members of Tech Forward's board of directors. It started innocently enough. Jennifer Thompson, the board chair, had sent a congratulations card when Emma was born. I had responded with a thoughtful thank you note, which led to a coffee meeting to show off baby pictures. That coffee meeting became a deeper conversation about the direction of Tech Forward's marketing department and Jennifer's growing concerns about the leadership style and strategic vision coming from the top. Over the following months, I carefully documented every interaction I had had with Monica, every dismissive comment about working mothers, every instance where promising female employees had been overlooked after starting families. I built a case not just against Monica's leadership, but for a different vision of what Tech Forward could become under more inclusive and forward-thinking management. The board had been quietly dealing with complaints about Monica's management style for months. Her results were strong, but her methods were increasingly problematic. Several talented employees had left citing toxic workplace culture, and there were whispers about discrimination that made the legal department nervous. When I presented my comprehensive analysis of the marketing department's untapped potential, along with a detailed plan for transformation, the board saw an opportunity to solve multiple problems at once. My phone buzzed quietly, pulling me back to the present moment. A text from Jennifer Thompson. "Board meeting moved to 11 a.m. Conference room ready. Break a leg." I smiled and typed back a quick acknowledgement, then glanced at the clock on my computer screen. It was 9:30 a.m., which gave me 90 minutes to observe and prepare for the confrontation that would define both of our careers. Through Monica's glass office walls, I could see her wrapping up her phone call. She stood up, smoothed down her skirt, and began walking in my direction. My heart rate increased slightly, but it wasn't from nervousness. It was from anticipation. For 18 months, I had imagined this moment, planned for it, prepared for every possible variation of how it might unfold. Monica's heels clicked against the floor as she approached my desk, her expression shifting from professional indifference to surprise as she recognized me. For a moment, Neither of us spoke. The ambient noise of the office seemed to fade into the background as we stared at each other across the divide of the past 18 months. Well, Monica said finally, her voice carrying that familiar tone of condescension I remembered so clearly. Sarah Chen. I heard someone was starting as a consultant today, but I didn't realize it was you. She paused, letting her eyes travel from my face to the temporary badge clipped to my blazer. How refreshing to see you back in the workforce. I was beginning to wonder if motherhood had claimed another promising career. I looked up from my laptop with what I hoped appeared to be a mixture of surprise and nervous enthusiasm. Monica, what a coincidence. I didn't realize you were still heading up marketing here. The lie came easily, delivered with just the right amount of uncertainty to sell the performance. Still heading it up? Monica laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. Sarah, I've expanded the department by 40% since you left. 3 new major clients, 2 industry awards, and a promotion to senior vice president. Some of us have been busy building empires while others have been, well, building families. The comment stung exactly as it was intended to, but I absorbed it without reaction. Instead, I nodded thoughtfully, as if considering her words with the respect she clearly felt they deserved. That's incredible, Monica. The company is lucky to have leadership like that. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She smiled, clearly pleased with what she interpreted as deference. Well, I'm sure you'll find your place here eventually. Consulting work can be quite fulfilling for someone in your position. Less pressure, more flexibility for family obligations. It's really the perfect arrangement for working mothers. I could feel the eyes of nearby colleagues on us, some pretending to work while clearly listening to our conversation. This was exactly the kind of interaction that had made Monica's management style increasingly problematic. Her inability to see talent and potential in women who had families wasn't just personally offensive, it was bad for business. I appreciate the perspective, I said carefully. Though I have to say, some of the most innovative marketing strategies I've seen recently have come from leaders who bring diverse life experiences to their work. There's something to be said for the problem-solving skills that come from managing multiple priorities. Monica's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of irritation crossing her features. This wasn't the response she had expected. The Sarah Chen she remembered had been more deferential, more willing to accept her pronouncements without question. Innovation is important, she conceded, but execution is everything. This industry doesn't reward good intentions, Sarah. It rewards results, and results require focus. I've learned that the hard way. She glanced at her watch, a gesture that clearly indicated she considered this conversation a charitable use of her valuable time. Speaking of focus, I should mention that we're implementing some new protocols for consultant work. All projects will need to be approved through my office, and I'll be personally reviewing any client-facing materials. The power play was obvious and petty, designed to make sure I understood exactly where I stood in her hierarchy. What Monica didn't realize was that in less than 2 hours, that entire hierarchy would be turned upside down. Of course, I replied. I wouldn't expect anything less than thorough oversight. Quality control is so important, especially when representing the company's brand. I paused, pretending to organize some papers on my desk. I noticed in some of the recent campaign reports that there have been some interesting challenges with client retention. The Peterson Group account, for instance. Monica's back stiffened. The Peterson Group had been one of TechForward's largest clients, and their recent decision to reduce their contract by 60% had been a significant blow to the department's numbers. It was also something that hadn't been widely discussed outside of senior management. Where exactly did you see information about Peterson Group? Monica asked, her voice taking on a sharper edge. I looked up with what I hoped appeared to be innocent confusion. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was in the general briefing materials I received. Was that confidential? I didn't realize. The performance was carefully calibrated to suggest that I had access to information without revealing the source. Monica studied me more carefully now, as if seeing me for the first time since our conversation began. The woman standing in front of her was not the same person who had left 18 months ago, carrying a box of personal items and fighting back tears. There was something different about my posture, my tone, my willingness to engage, rather than simply defer. The Peterson situation is being handled, she said finally. Client relationships go through natural cycles, and we're confident in our ability to rebuild that partnership. The words sounded rehearsed, like something she had said multiple times in recent board meetings. I nodded sympathetically. I'm sure you are. Client retention is such a complex challenge, especially in today's market where companies are looking for more personalized, relationship-driven approaches to their marketing partnerships. I let the words hang in the air for a moment before continuing. Some of the most successful turnarounds I've seen have involved bringing in fresh perspectives, people who can see opportunities that might not be obvious to those who have been close to the situation. The suggestion was subtle but clear, and Monica's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She was beginning to realize that this conversation was not unfolding according to her expectations. The returning mother she had anticipated encountering was supposed to be grateful, diminished, and appropriately humbled by her time away from the corporate world. Fresh perspectives can be valuable, Monica admitted grudgingly, but they're no substitute for institutional knowledge and proven track records. This department's success over the past 18 months speaks for itself. I smiled, an expression that didn't quite reach my eyes. Absolutely. Though I do find it interesting how success can be measured in so many different ways. Revenue growth, client satisfaction, employee retention, innovation metrics. It's fascinating how the same data can tell completely different stories depending on how you analyze it. Monica's eyes narrowed. This definitely wasn't the conversation she had planned to have with a newly returned consultant who should have been eager to please and desperate for any opportunity to prove herself. Instead, she was facing someone who seemed remarkably well-informed and surprisingly confident. "Sarah," she said, her tone becoming more formal, "I think we should schedule a proper meeting to discuss your role here and set appropriate expectations. This afternoon, perhaps?" I glanced at my computer screen, pretending to check my calendar. This afternoon might be challenging. I have several meetings scheduled, actually. I looked back up at her with an apologetic expression. But I'm sure we'll have plenty of opportunities to discuss expectations. In fact, I believe there's a department-wide meeting scheduled for right after the board announcement this morning. Monica froze. Board announcement? "Oh," I said, feigning surprise at her apparent confusion. "I thought everyone knew. There's supposed to be some kind of organizational update at 11. I just assumed as senior vice president you would be in the loop on that kind of thing." The color drained slightly from Monica's face. Board announcements were rarely good news for middle management, especially when they came without advance warning. In her experience, sudden organizational updates usually meant restructuring, layoffs, or changes in leadership that could affect everyone's position. "I haven't heard anything official," she said carefully, but I could see the wheels turning. In her mind, she was already calculating who she needed to call, what meetings she needed to schedule, what damage control might be necessary. "I'm sure it's nothing major," I said with studied casualness. Though I did overhear someone mention something about new leadership initiatives and fresh approaches to departmental management. I returned my attention to my laptop screen, effectively dismissing her from the conversation. "Well, I should probably get back to reviewing these materials. Don't want to fall behind on my first day." Monica stood there for another moment, clearly struggling with the desire to ask more questions and the need to maintain her authoritative facade. Finally, she settled on a response that allowed her to retreat with some dignity intact. Yes. Well, make sure you're prepared for whatever developments emerge today. Change can be challenging for people who have been away from the corporate environment. She turned to leave, then paused and looked back. Oh, and Sarah? Welcome back to the real world. As Monica's heels clicked away across the floor, I allowed myself a small smile. The first act of this carefully choreographed drama was complete, and it had unfolded exactly as I had hoped. Monica was now aware that something was different, but she had no idea what or how much. The seeds of uncertainty had been planted, and over the next 90 minutes, they would grow into full-blown anxiety as she tried to figure out what was happening and how it might affect her carefully constructed kingdom. I returned my attention to my laptop, but my mind was already moving ahead to the next phase of the plan. At 11 a.m., Jennifer Thompson would call the department together for what everyone would assume was a routine organizational update. Monica would be expecting to stand beside the board chair as changes were announced, secure in her position as the senior leader in the room. Instead, she would watch as the temporary consultant she had just condescended to was introduced as her replacement, armed with a comprehensive plan for transforming not just the marketing department, but the entire company's approach to leadership, innovation, and employee development. The morning sun continued to stream through the windows, casting shifting patterns of light across the office floor. In the distance, I could hear the familiar sounds of a busy workplace. Phones ringing, keyboards clicking, conversations flowing between cubicles, but underneath it all, there was an undercurrent of anticipation, as if the entire building was holding its breath waiting for something to happen. My phone buzzed with another message, this time from Tom. Emma said mama 3 times this morning. She knows you're doing something important today. We're both proud of you. I smiled, thinking about my daughter's bright eyes and infectious laugh. Everything I was doing today, every carefully planned move in this corporate chess game, was ultimately about building a better world for her. A world where women didn't have to choose between career success and family, where motherhood was seen as an asset rather than a liability, and where leaders were judged by their vision and results rather than outdated assumptions about work-life balance. As I looked around the office, I saw the faces of women who had been passed over for promotions, overlooked for challenging assignments, and gradually sidelined after starting families. Lisa Park, a brilliant strategist who had been relegated to social media management after her second child. Jennifer Martinez, whose innovative campaign ideas were consistently attributed to male colleagues. Amanda Foster, who had been promised a promotion that never materialized after she mentioned wanting to start a family. All of them deserved better, and in less than 90 minutes, they were going to get it. The clock on my computer screen showed 10:15 a.m., 45 minutes until the board meeting that would change everything. I closed my laptop and stood up, smoothing down my skirt with hands that were perfectly steady. It was time to make a few final preparations for the moment I had been planning for 18 months. As I walked toward the elevator that would take me up to the executive floor, I caught Monica's eye through her office window. She was on another phone call, but her expression was tense, worried. She had spent the morning trying to figure out what was happening, making calls to contacts throughout the company, searching for information about the mysterious board announcement that everyone seemed to know about except her. In a few minutes, all of her questions would be answered. The temporary consultant badge hanging from my blazer would be replaced by a permanent executive credential. The modest desk in the open floor area would be exchanged for the corner office that Monica currently occupied, and the woman who had dismissed my potential 18 months ago would have to confront the reality that motherhood hadn't ruined my career at all. It had transformed me into exactly the kind of leader tech-forward solutions needed for the future. The elevator to the 28th floor felt different this time. As the numbers climbed higher, I could feel the weight of anticipation settling in my chest. But it wasn't nervousness. It was the quiet satisfaction of a plan 18 months in the making finally coming to fruition. The polished steel doors reflected a woman who looked nothing like the tearful employee who had cleaned out her desk over a year ago. This version of Sarah Chen carried herself with the confidence of someone who had spent months not just nurturing a baby, but strategically positioning herself for this exact moment. When the doors opened, I stepped into the executive corridor with its plush carpeting and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Austin. The familiar scent of expensive coffee and leather furniture filled the air, reminders of a world I had been excluded from but never forgotten. Jennifer Thompson's assistant, Margaret, looked up from her desk with a knowing smile. "Ms. Chen, so good to see you again. Ms. Thompson is expecting you in her office before the announcement." Margaret's tone was warm but professional, giving nothing away to the few other executives who might be listening. The secrecy that had surrounded my hiring was about to end, but for now, we maintained the carefully constructed facade. Jennifer's corner office commanded a spectacular view of the city skyline, with floor-to-ceiling windows that made the space feel boundless. She stood as I entered, extending her hand with genuine warmth. At 58, Jennifer Thompson was everything Monica Williams pretended to be: successful, commanding, and secure enough in her own power to lift others without feeling threatened. "Sarah, you look fantastic. Motherhood suits you." Jennifer gestured to the sitting area, where fresh coffee and pastries had been arranged. "I have to admit, I'm excited to see Monica's face when she realizes what's happening." I settled into the leather chair across from her, accepting the offered coffee gratefully. "I appreciate everything you and the board have done to make this possible. I know it wasn't a conventional hiring process." Jennifer laughed, a rich sound that filled the office. "Conventional doesn't always produce the best results. Your proposal for transforming our approach to employee development and client relations was exactly what we needed to hear. The fact that it came from someone Monica had written off makes it even more compelling." Through the window, I could see the marketing department 15 floors below, a grid of workstations and offices where people were going about their Monday morning routines, with no idea that everything was about to change. Monica would be in her office now, probably still making phone calls and trying to piece together information about the mysterious board announcement. "Have you given any thought to how you want to handle the transition?" Jennifer asked, her tone becoming more businesslike. "Monica has been with the company for 8 years. She has supporters, people who will be resistant to change." I had thought about little else during the sleepless nights of early motherhood, when Emma's feeding schedule had given me plenty of quiet hours to plan and strategize. I want to focus on results and collaboration rather than personality conflicts. Monica's methods have created measurable problems, retention issues, client dissatisfaction, innovation stagnation. The data speaks for itself. Jennifer nodded approvingly. "That's exactly the approach the board was hoping to hear. We're not looking for drama or revenge. We need leadership that can move the company forward." A soft knock interrupted our conversation, and Margaret appeared in the doorway. "Ms. Thompson, it's time. The conference room is ready, and all department heads have been notified." I stood, smoothing down my blazer one final time. The temporary consultant badge felt absurdly light against my chest, knowing that in a few minutes it would be replaced by the executive credentials that truly reflected my new position. "Are you ready to change some lives?" Jennifer asked with a smile. The Innovation Hub conference room was Tech Forward's crown jewel, with a massive oval table that could seat 30 people and wall-mounted displays that currently showed the company's logo and mission statement. As we entered, I could see that most of the department heads had already arrived, their conversations dying down as they noticed Jennifer's entrance. Monica sat near the head of the table, her posture confident and her expression suggesting she expected to be involved in whatever announcement was coming. I took a seat toward the middle of the table, playing my role as a mid-level consultant who was grateful to be included in such an important meeting. Several people nodded politely in my direction, but most attention was focused on Jennifer as she moved to the front of the room. Thank you all for adjusting your schedules on such short notice, Jennifer began, her voice carrying easily through the space. I know Monday mornings are busy, but we have some exciting developments to share that couldn't wait for our usual monthly meeting. Monica straightened in her chair, clearly expecting to be called upon to present whatever marketing initiative she assumed was being announced. Instead, Jennifer's gaze moved around the room, building suspense with practiced skill. As you all know, Tech Forward has experienced tremendous growth over the past few years. Our client base has expanded, our revenue has increased, and our reputation in the industry continues to strengthen. Jennifer paused, letting the positive news settle before continuing. However, growth also brings challenges. We've identified some areas where our internal processes and leadership approaches need to evolve to match our external success. I could see Monica's expression beginning to shift, confusion replacing confidence as she realized this wasn't the celebratory announcement she had anticipated. Around the table, other department heads were leaning forward, sensing that something significant was about to be revealed. Employee satisfaction surveys have shown declining scores in several key areas, Jennifer continued, clicking to display a graph on the wall-mounted screen. Workplace culture, advancement opportunities, and work-life balance have all seen concerning trends over the past 18 months. The data was damning, particularly for the marketing department, where employee turnover had reached 28%, well above industry standards. Monica's face was growing pale as she recognized the implications of what was being presented. Additionally, we've seen challenges in client retention and innovation metrics that suggest our current approach to leadership may not be sustainable for long-term growth. Jennifer's tone remained professional, but the message was clear. Someone was being held accountable for these problems. I remained perfectly still, my expression neutral as I watched the drama unfold around me. Several department heads were stealing glances at Monica, clearly recognizing that the marketing division was being specifically highlighted in these concerning trends. The board has spent considerable time analyzing these challenges and developing a comprehensive response, Jennifer continued. We believe that fresh leadership, combined with new approaches to employee development and client relations, can address these issues while maintaining our trajectory of growth. Monica finally found her voice. Jennifer, I appreciate the thorough analysis, but I think these numbers may not reflect the full picture of what we've accomplished in marketing. Our revenue numbers have been strong, and we've successfully navigated several challenging client situations. The response was exactly what I had expected: defensive, focused on metrics that looked good on paper while ignoring the human cost of achieving them. Jennifer handled it with diplomatic grace. You're absolutely right that marketing has achieved strong revenue numbers, Monica. That's not in question. What we're addressing today is the sustainability of our current methods and the opportunity to build on that success with enhanced leadership capabilities. Jennifer clicked to the next slide, which showed organizational charts and reporting structures. Effective immediately, we're implementing several changes to better align our leadership team with our long-term strategic goals. The room fell silent, everyone recognizing that the real announcement was finally coming. I could feel my heart rate increase slightly, not from nervousness but from anticipation. 18 months of planning, strategizing, and careful relationship building had led to this moment. I'm pleased to announce that Chen will be joining our executive team as Chief Marketing Officer. Jennifer's voice carried clearly through the suddenly electric atmosphere of the conference room. Sarah brings extensive experience in innovative marketing strategies, client relationship management, and team development that align perfectly with our vision for the future. The silence that followed was profound. I could see heads turning in my direction, expressions ranging from surprise to confusion to dawning recognition. Monica sat frozen, her face cycling through disbelief, anger, and something that might have been fear as the full implications of the announcement hit her. I stood slowly, my movements deliberate and composed. The temporary consultant badge that had served its purpose was no longer necessary, and I removed it calmly, placing it on the Y table in front of me. Thank you, Jennifer, and thank you to the board for this incredible opportunity. My voice carried easily through the room, confident and clear. Gone was any trace of the uncertain woman who had left Tech Forward 18 months ago. I'm excited to work with all of you to build on the strong foundation that exists here while implementing new approaches that will benefit our employees, our clients, and our bottom line. Monica's mouth opened and closed several times before she managed to find words. This is impossible. Sarah was hired as a consultant. She's been out of the workforce for over a year. How can she possibly be qualified for the CMO position? The challenge was direct and aggressive, exactly the kind of response that had made Monica's leadership style increasingly problematic. Jennifer handled it with calm authority. Sarah's qualifications were thoroughly reviewed by the board over several months. Her track record of success, her innovative approach to marketing strategy, and her vision for sustainable team development made her the clear choice for this position. I remained standing, my posture relaxed but authoritative. I understand this comes as a surprise to many of you. I know there may be questions about my experience and qualifications. I'm looking forward to addressing those concerns through my work and results. Around the table, I could see various reactions playing out. Some department heads were nodding approvingly, perhaps recognizing that change had been needed for some time. Others looked uncertain, clearly trying to process this unexpected development. Monica's supporters seemed confused, unsure how to react to such a dramatic shift in the power dynamic. "What about the marketing department's current leadership structure?" asked Kevin Brown from finance, his question clearly directed at understanding Monica's new role. Jennifer fielded this question smoothly. Monica will be transitioning to a new position as senior marketing strategist, where her experience and institutional knowledge will continue to be valuable assets to the team. We believe this restructuring will allow everyone to contribute their strengths most effectively. The demotion was delivered with diplomatic language, but its impact was unmistakable. Monica's face went through another cycle of emotions, settling on barely controlled fury. The woman who had dismissed my potential 18 months ago was now facing the reality that I had not only survived her predictions of failure, but had positioned myself to become her superior. "I need to understand the timeline for this transition," Monica said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "I have ongoing projects, client relationships, strategic initiatives that can't simply be handed over without proper preparation." I spoke for the first time since the initial announcement, my tone professional but firm. "Of course, Monica. I wouldn't want to disrupt any critical client relationships or ongoing projects. I'm hoping we can schedule time this afternoon to review everything and ensure a smooth transition that protects the company's interests." The reversal was complete and undeniable. The woman who had once lectured me about the realities of corporate life was now being managed by someone she had written off as a casualty of motherhood. The symmetry was perfect, though I took no joy in her obvious distress. This had never been about revenge. It had been about proving that her assumptions about working mothers were not just wrong, but destructively outdated. "Sarah," said Lisa. "Park from her position near the end of the table. What's your vision for the department going forward? What changes can we expect?" This was the question I had been preparing for, the opportunity to lay out the comprehensive plan that had convinced the board to take such a dramatic step. I moved to the front of the room, taking the position that Jennifer graciously yielded to me. "My primary focus will be on creating an environment where innovation thrives through collaboration rather than competition," I began, clicking to display the first slide of my presentation. "We'll be implementing new approaches to project management that leverage diverse perspectives and encourage creative problem-solving." The slides that followed outlined a comprehensive transformation, flexible work arrangements that recognized employees' full lives, mentorship programs that developed talent at all levels, client relationship strategies that prioritized long-term partnerships over short-term metrics, and innovation incentives that rewarded calculated risk-taking. We'll also be establishing new metrics for success that go beyond traditional revenue numbers, I continued, aware that Monica was staring at me with undisguised hostility. Employee satisfaction, client retention rates, innovation pipeline, development and sustainable growth indicators will all factor into how we evaluate our performance. The presentation continued for 20 minutes, outlining specific initiatives and timelines for implementation. With each slide, I could see the enthusiasm building among the department heads who had been struggling with the challenges created by the previous management approach. Even those who had been initially skeptical were beginning to nod along with the strategic vision being presented. "Questions?" I asked as I concluded the formal presentation. Mark Rodriguez from IT raised his hand. "This sounds fantastic, Sarah, but implementation will require significant changes to our current systems and processes. What kind of timeline are we looking at?" "Great question, Mark. I've already begun preliminary discussions with several department heads about the technical requirements for these changes. We'll be implementing them in phases over the next 6 months, with the most critical elements prioritized for the first 90 days. The admission that I had been planning this transition for months was another revelation for those who had assumed my consultant position was temporary and insignificant. Monica's eyes widened as she realized the depth of preparation that had gone into this moment. "How long have you been planning this?" she asked, her voice barely controlled. I met her gaze directly, my expression calm and professional. "I've been developing these ideas and strategies throughout my time away from Tech Forward. Motherhood provided me with new perspectives on work-life integration, team dynamics, and sustainable success that I'm excited to bring to this role." The answer was truthful while being strategically vague about the timeline and extent of my planning. Monica clearly wanted to know more, to understand exactly how she had been outmaneuvered, but the professional setting prevented her from asking the direct questions that might have satisfied her curiosity. Jennifer stepped forward to conclude the meeting. "I know this is a lot of information to process, and there will undoubtedly be more questions as we move forward. Sarah will be scheduling individual meetings with each department head over the next week to discuss how these changes will affect your specific areas." As people began gathering their materials and preparing to leave, I could see the immediate aftermath of the announcement playing out in hushed conversations and meaningful glances. The power dynamic in the room had shifted completely, and everyone was recalibrating their understanding of who held influence and authority. Monica remained seated as others filed out, her posture rigid and her expression unreadable. When the room had mostly cleared, she finally stood and approached me with deliberate steps. "I don't know how you orchestrated this," she said in a low voice that wouldn't carry to the few remaining people in the room. "But don't think it changes anything. You're still the same person who left here 18 months ago, and being handed a title doesn't automatically make you qualified to lead." I faced her directly, my posture relaxed but my voice carrying quiet authority. "You're right that a title alone doesn't create qualifications. Results do. Performance does. The ability to inspire and develop others does. I'm looking forward to demonstrating all of those things in this role." Monica's jaw tightened, but before she could respond, Jennifer approached us with a smile that didn't quite mask the steel underneath. "Monica, I know this transition represents a significant change for you. I want to assure you that your experience and knowledge will continue to be valued in your new role. Sarah, your first executive team meeting is scheduled for Wednesday morning. I'll have Margaret send you the details." The dismissal was polite but clear. Monica gathered her materials with movements that were slightly too sharp, her composure finally beginning to crack under the weight of what had just happened. As she walked toward the door, she turned back one final time. "Enjoy your moment, Sarah. But remember, This industry has a way of humbling people who think they can change everything overnight. Her parting shot was delivered with a smile that held no warmth. Then she was gone, leaving behind the lingering scent of expensive perfume and barely suppressed rage. I remained in the conference room for a few more minutes, ostensibly reviewing my notes, but actually allowing myself to process what had just occurred. The first phase of my plan was complete. Monica Williams, the woman who had dismissed my potential and written off my career, had just watched me claim the position she had assumed would eventually be hers. But this victory felt different than I had expected. There was satisfaction, certainly, and a sense of justice finally being served. But there was also a weight of responsibility that went far beyond personal vindication. The employees who had been demoralized under Monica's leadership were now looking to me for something better. The clients who had been frustrated with outdated approaches were expecting innovation and renewed commitment. The board members who had taken a significant risk in hiring me were counting on results that justified their decision. As I gathered my materials and prepared to leave the conference room, I thought about Emma, probably taking her morning nap at daycare while her mother navigated corporate power dynamics on the 28th floor of a downtown office building. Everything. I had worked for every strategic move and carefully planned conversation, had been motivated by the desire to create a better world for her. A world where being a mother wasn't seen as a limitation, but as an additional source of strength and perspective. The elevator ride back down to the 15th floor gave me a few minutes to transition from the executive boardroom to the marketing department, where the real work would begin. Word of the announcement would spread quickly through the building, and by lunchtime, everyone would know that the consulting arrangement had been a carefully constructed cover for something much more significant. When the elevator doors opened, I could immediately sense the changed atmosphere. Conversation stopped as I walked through the department, replaced by curious stares and whispered speculation. The temporary desk that had served its purpose this morning would soon be replaced by Monica's corner office, but for now, I returned to my modest workstation to begin the process of transitioning from secret executive to visible leader. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "Emma and I are both proud of you. How did it go?" I smiled as I typed back, "Phase 1 complete. The real work starts now." Looking around the marketing department, I could see the faces of people whose careers had been stunted by outdated assumptions about work-life balance, innovation, and leadership. Lisa Park was stealing glances in my direction, hope flickering in her eyes for the first time in months. Amanda Foster was having an animated conversation with two colleagues, their body language suggesting excitement about whatever they were discussing. The revolution had begun, but it would be measured not in dramatic confrontations or satisfying moments of personal vindication. It would be measured in employee satisfaction scores, client retention rates, innovation metrics, and the daily experience of people who came to work feeling valued and empowered rather than diminished and dismissed. Monica's prediction that motherhood would ruin my career had been spectacularly wrong. Instead, it had provided me with the perspective, motivation, and strategic thinking that had made this moment possible. The woman who had written me off as another casualty of work-life balance was about to discover that the most dangerous underestimate she could make was dismissing the potential of a determined mother who had spent 18 months planning her return. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of what had been Monica's corner office just hours earlier. I stood behind the mahogany desk, watching as the facilities team efficiently transferred the last of her personal items into storage boxes. The walls, once decorated with Monica's awards and power photos with industry executives, now displayed my certifications and the comprehensive strategic plan that had convinced the board to make such a dramatic leadership change. Margaret knocked softly on the doorframe. "Ms. Chen, your nameplate has been updated and IT has transferred all system access. You should have full executive privileges now." She handed me a sleek black executive badge that felt substantially heavier than the temporary consultant pass I had worn that morning. The weight was symbolic, representing not just access to secure areas of the building, but the authority to make decisions that would affect hundreds of employees and millions of dollars in client relationships. Thank you, Margaret. Could you please ask Lisa Park to come see me when she has a moment, and schedule individual meetings with each of the marketing team leads for tomorrow morning? I settled into the leather chair behind the desk, noting how different the office felt from this perspective. When I had been a senior marketing strategist, this office had seemed intimidating, a symbol of power and authority that felt impossibly distant. Now it was simply a workspace, albeit one with an exceptional view of downtown Austin. Lisa appeared in the doorway 15 minutes later, her expression a mixture of curiosity and barely contained excitement. At 34, she was one of the most talented strategists in the department, but her career had stalled after the birth of her second child 2 years ago. Monica had gradually shifted her away from high-profile client accounts, citing concerns about her availability and focus. Sarah, congratulations. I have to admit, this morning has been full of surprises. Lisa's smile was genuine, but I could see the wariness behind it. She had learned to be cautious about expressing too much enthusiasm, having been disappointed too many times by promises of opportunity that never materialized. I gestured for her to take a seat in one of the visitor chairs. Thank you, Lisa. I know this transition is unexpected for everyone. I wanted to speak with you specifically because I've been reviewing your work over the past 2 years, and I think you've been significantly underutilized. Lisa's eyes widened slightly. I appreciate that, but Monica felt that my current assignment load was appropriate given my family responsibilities. The social media accounts are important, and they allow me the flexibility I need. The response was carefully neutral, but I could hear the frustration underneath. Lisa had gone from managing multi-million-dollar campaigns to posting content updates, a demotion disguised as accommodation. What if I told you that I think your family responsibilities actually make you better at strategic thinking, not worse? I'm not sure I understand what you mean. Lisa leaned forward, her interest clearly piqued despite her caution. I pulled up her personnel file on my computer screen, scrolling through performance reviews and project assignments. Your work before you had children shows exceptional strategic thinking, creative problem-solving, and client relationship management. After you became a mother, those skills didn't disappear, they evolved. Managing multiple priorities, thinking several steps ahead, finding creative solutions with limited resources, those are exactly the capabilities our clients need most. Lisa was quiet for a moment, processing what I was saying. Monica felt that clients would be concerned about my availability, especially for crisis management situations. Monica was wrong. The statement hung in the air between us, direct and unambiguous. I've spent the last several months reviewing our client feedback and retention data. The accounts you managed had the highest satisfaction scores and the lowest turnover rates in the department. When you were reassigned, 3 of those clients specifically asked about working with you again. I could see the impact of this information on Lisa's face. For 2 years, she had been told that her value to the company had diminished, that her contributions were appreciated but necessarily limited. The data told a completely different story. I want to offer you the position of Senior Client Strategy Director, I continued. It would involve managing our top 5 accounts, leading a team of junior strategists, and developing the client relationship protocols that will be implemented department-wide. Lisa stared at me for several seconds, her expression cycling through disbelief, hope, and something that might have been fear. Sarah, that sounds incredible, but I need to be honest about my limitations. I can't work the 70-hour weeks that used to be standard. I need to pick up my children from school. I can't travel extensively, and there will be times when family emergencies take priority. I smiled, recognizing the conversation I had hoped to have with Monica 18 months earlier. Lisa, I'm not asking you to choose between being an excellent mother and being an excellent strategist. I'm asking you to be both, because that Combination is exactly what makes you so valuable. We'll structure the role around sustainable productivity, not FaceTime. Results matter, not hours logged. The transformation in Lisa's posture was immediate and dramatic. She sat up straighter, her shoulders pulling back as if she was literally shedding the weight of 2 years of diminished expectations. When would you want me to start? Next Monday. That gives you this week to transition your current responsibilities and review the strategic materials for your new accounts. I handed her a folder containing preliminary information about the role. I also want you to start thinking about other team members who might have been underutilized. We're going to be making a lot of changes, and I need people who understand both the potential and the challenges we're facing. After Lisa left, practically floating with excitement about her new opportunity, I spent the rest of the afternoon in similar conversations with other team members. Amanda Foster, who had been passed over for promotions despite consistently excellent performance, was offered the role of Innovation Director. Kevin Martinez, whose creative campaign ideas had been repeatedly shelved, was asked to lead the new Product Marketing Initiative. Each conversation followed a similar pattern: initial surprise, cautious interest, growing excitement as they realized their contributions had been recognized and valued, and finally, enthusiastic commitment to the vision I was outlining for the department's future. By 5 o'clock, I had fundamentally restructured the marketing department's leadership team, promoted 4 people who had been stagnating under the previous management, and begun implementing the collaborative approach that had convinced the EII board to hire me. The energy in the office was palpable, with animated conversations happening in clusters throughout the floor as news of the promotions and new initiatives spread. Monica had not been seen since the morning's board meeting. According to Margaret, she had spent most of the afternoon in HR, presumably discussing the terms of her transition to the new role. I had mixed feelings about her absence. Part of me had expected a more direct confrontation, another opportunity, to demonstrate how completely the power dynamic had shifted. But perhaps her withdrawal was more telling than any dramatic scene could have been. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Thompson. "How's your first day as CMO going? The early reports I'm hearing are very positive." I typed back quickly, "Productive. Change is happening faster than I expected." Her response came immediately. "That's exactly what we were hoping to hear." As the office began to empty for the evening, I remained at my desk, reviewing client files and strategic documents that would inform the decisions I would be making over the coming weeks. The view from the corner office showed the city lights, beginning to twinkle as Austin transitioned from day to evening, and I found myself thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment. 18 months ago, I had left this building carrying a cardboard box and Monica's prediction that motherhood would end my career aspirations. Tonight, I was sitting in her former office, having spent the day implementing changes that would transform not just the marketing department, but the entire company's approach to talent development and employee satisfaction. The irony was profound, but it was also incomplete. Monica's dismissive attitude toward working mothers had been wrong, but it hadn't been uniquely hers. She had been reflecting broader assumptions about women, careers, and family responsibilities that existed throughout the corporate world. Changing those assumptions would require more than replacing one person with another. It would require demonstrating, through results and sustained success, that different approaches could be more effective. A soft knock on my door interrupted my thoughts. I looked up to see Monica standing in the doorway, her posture stiff and her expression carefully controlled. She had changed from the professional dress she had worn to the morning meeting into more casual attire, suggesting she had been home at some point during the afternoon. "Do you have a few minutes?" she asked, her tone neutral but strained. I gestured to the visitor chairs, the same ones where we had held our devastating conversation 18 months earlier. The symmetry was not lost on either of us as she sat, down across from the desk that was now mine. "I wanted to discuss the transition timeline and my new responsibilities," Monica began, her voice carefully professional. HR was somewhat vague about the specifics. I pulled up the organizational chart on my computer screen, turning it so she could see the updated structure. You'll be reporting to Lisa Park, who's taking over as Senior Client Strategy Director. Your focus will be on individual account management and campaign development, with opportunities to contribute to broader strategic initiatives based on performance and team collaboration. Monica's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Reporting to Lisa, someone she had marginalized and demoted, was clearly more difficult to accept than she had anticipated. Lisa hasn't managed senior-level accounts in over 2 years. Don't you think there might be some client concerns about continuity and experience? The question was phrased professionally, but the underlying challenge was clear. Monica was testing whether I would defend my personnel decisions or whether doubt could be introduced about the wisdom of the changes I was implementing. Lisa managed those accounts excellently before you reassigned her, and the clients specifically requested to work with her again. She has the strategic thinking and relationship management skills that our data shows are most important for client satisfaction and retention. I kept my tone matter-of-fact, presenting information rather than engaging in the power struggle Monica seemed to be seeking. Client satisfaction is important, Monica conceded, but so are revenue growth and market expansion. Those require a different kind of aggressive strategic thinking that comes from experience in high-pressure situations. I studied her carefully, recognizing the argument she was making. It was the same logic she had used 18 months ago to justify why motherhood would limit my career potential, that success required total dedication, aggressive competition, and the willingness to prioritize work above all other considerations. Our revenue growth has been strong, I agreed, but client retention and employee satisfaction have both declined significantly. Sustainable success requires balancing aggressive growth with relationship management and team development. The data suggests that our current approach, while generating short-term results, may not be viable long-term. Monica leaned back in her chair, her expression becoming more guarded. Sarah, I respect what you're trying to accomplish here, but I think you may be underestimating the complexities of this industry. Good intentions don't always translate into practical solutions. The condescension in her tone was subtle, but unmistakable, echoing the same dismissive attitude that had characterized our previous interactions. But now, instead of making me feel diminished and uncertain, it simply reinforced my confidence in the decisions I was making. You're right that good intentions aren't sufficient, I replied. That's why I spent months developing a comprehensive, strategic plan, analyzing performance data, and building relationships with board members who could evaluate the viability of these approaches. The changes we're implementing aren't based on idealism. They're based on research and measurable outcomes. For the first time since entering my office, Monica's composed facade cracked slightly. Months? You've been planning this for months? I nodded calmly. I began developing these strategies shortly after Emma was born. Motherhood gave me new perspectives on productivity, time management, and collaborative problem-solving. Instead of limiting my strategic thinking, it enhanced Monica was quiet for several moments, processing the implications of what I was telling her. She had assumed that my maternity leave represented a retreat from professional ambition, a temporary exit from the competitive corporate environment that would leave me diminished and grateful for any opportunity to return. Instead, it had been a period of intensive preparation and strategic positioning. I still think you're making a mistake with some of these personnel changes, she said finally. Lisa is talented, but she's been out of the strategic loop for 2 years. Amanda has good ideas, but she lacks the experience to manage initiatives. You're promoting people based on potential, rather than proven performance. The criticism was more direct now, Monica's frustration with her diminished position beginning to show through her professional veneer. But her arguments also revealed the fundamental difference in our approaches to leadership and talent development. You're right that I'm promoting people based on potential, I acknowledged, but I'm also promoting them based on performance. That was undervalued and underutilized under the previous management structure. Lisa's strategic thinking didn't disappear when she became a mother. It evolved. Amanda's innovation ideas weren't less valuable because she was juggling family responsibilities. They were different and potentially more creative because of those experiences. Monica shook her head, a gesture that seemed to encompass both disagreement and resignation. I hope you're right, Sarah. I genuinely hope these changes work out the way you're envisioning. But if they don't, if client relationships suffer or revenue growth stagnates, the board won't hesitate to hold you accountable. There was something almost like warning in her tone, though whether it was meant as advice or threat was unclear. I considered my response carefully, recognizing that this conversation would likely define the tone of our working relationship going forward. I appreciate your concern, Monica. You're absolutely right that I'll be held accountable for the results of these changes. That's exactly as it should be. Leadership means taking responsibility for outcomes, not just claiming credit for successes. Monica stood, smoothing down her skirt with movements that were slightly too sharp. Well, I suppose we'll see how it all unfolds. I'll plan to be in early tomorrow to begin transitioning my current projects to the new structure. After she left, I remained at my desk for another hour, reviewing the strategic plans that would guide the department's transformation over the coming months. The conversation with Monica had clarified something important. Resistance to change would come not just from her, but from anyone who had benefited from or become comfortable with the old system. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. How was your first day as the boss? Emma keeps pointing at your picture and saying, "Mama work." I smiled, thinking about my daughter's bright eyes and infectious enthusiasm. Everything I was doing, every difficult conversation and strategic decision, was ultimately about creating a better world for her generation. A world where women wouldn't have to choose between career success and family fulfillment, where leadership was measured by the ability to develop others rather than diminish them. The cleaning crew was making their rounds as I finally gathered my materials and prepared to leave. The marketing department was quiet now, but tomorrow it would buzz with the energy of people who had been given new opportunities to contribute and grow. Lisa would begin transitioning into her new role, Amanda would start developing innovation protocols, and Kevin would begin conceptualizing the creative campaigns that had been stifled for too long. As I walked toward the elevator, I passed Monica's new workstation, a modest desk in the open floor area that mirrored the space I had occupied that morning. The symbolism was obvious and uncomfortable, but it was also necessary. Leadership transitions required clear signals about new hierarchies and expectations. The elevator ride down to the parking garage gave me a few minutes to decompress from the intensity of the day. In 12 hours, I had gone from secret consultant to public executive, from strategic planner to active implementer, from dismissed former employee to the person responsible for transforming an entire department's culture and performance. The real test would come in the weeks and months ahead, as the changes I was implementing either succeeded in improving both employee satisfaction and business results, or failed in ways that would validate Monica's skepticism. But tonight, driving home through the Austin traffic to a house where my husband and daughter were waiting to hear about my first day as Chief Marketing Officer, I felt confident that the foundation had been laid for something genuinely transformative. Monica's prediction that motherhood would ruin my career had been spectacularly wrong. Instead of limiting my potential, it had provided me with the motivation, perspective, and strategic thinking that had made this day possible. The woman who had written me off as another casualty of work-life balance was now working for the company. I was reshaping in ways she had never imagined possible. The revolution was just beginning, and tomorrow would bring new challenges, opportunities, and the chance to prove that effective leadership could be both ambitious and sustainable. Both, results-driven and human-centered. The temporary consultant badge was forgotten, replaced by executive credentials and the authority to make decisions that would ripple through hundreds of careers and millions of dollars in business relationships. As I pulled into my driveway and saw the warm lights of home, I thought about Emma sleeping peacefully in her crib, unaware that her mother had spent the day fundamentally changing the trajectory of both of their lives. The future I was building would be one where she would never have to hear that motherhood was incompatible with professional success, because by the time she entered the workforce, leaders like me would have proven conclusively that the opposite was true. The following Monday morning arrived with an energy that crackled through the marketing department like electricity before a storm. Word of the dramatic leadership changes had spread throughout Tech Forward over the weekend, carried by employee text chains, social media updates, and the kind of whispered conversations that happen when fundamental power structures shift overnight. As I stepped off the elevator at 8:30, coffee in hand and laptop bag slung over my shoulder, I could feel the weight of dozens of eyes tracking my movement across the floor. The transformation was already visible in ways both subtle and obvious. Lisa Park sat at her new desk in the senior strategist area, surrounded by client files and strategy documents, her posture radiating the confidence of someone who had finally been given the opportunity to use her full capabilities. Amanda Foster was deep in conversation with two junior associates, gesturing animatedly as she outlined plans for the innovation initiative that would launch later that week. Even the physical space felt different, with barriers between workstations being removed and collaborative areas being established where rigid hierarchies had once enforced isolation. My executive assistant, a sharp woman named Rachel, whom I had inherited from Monica's departure, greeted me with a stack of messages and a knowing smile. "Good morning, Ms. Chen. You have 17 interview requests from industry publications, 12 meeting requests from other department heads, and about 30 internal emails from employees requesting information about the new initiative programs." The media attention was expected, but still surreal. Tech Forward's leadership shakeup had apparently resonated beyond our company walls, with several business journals wanting to explore the story of a working mother who had returned from maternity leave to claim an executive position from the boss who had dismissed her potential. I had already decided to be selective about media opportunities, focusing on outlets that would treat the story as more than just corporate drama. Schedule the interview with Austin Business Journal for Thursday afternoon, and let's set up group meetings with employees rather than individual responses to all those internal requests. I want to make sure everyone has access to the same information. I glanced through the meeting requests, noting that several department heads who had barely acknowledged my existence when I was a senior strategist were now eager to collaborate. The morning was consumed by a series of meetings that demonstrated just how much the company dynamics had shifted. Kevin Brown from finance, who had once treated marketing requests with barely concealed dismissal, now approached our conversation with the kind of respect typically reserved for board members. Mark Rodriguez from IT was suddenly enthusiastic about supporting the technological infrastructure needed for our new collaborative systems. But it was the meeting with the marketing team that revealed the true scope of what was happening. I had called together all 15 members of the department, from senior strategists to junior associates, to outline the comprehensive changes that would reshape how they worked, how they were evaluated, and how they could advance their careers. The conference room was packed, with several people standing along the walls when the chairs filled up. The energy was different from any department meeting I had experienced during my previous tenure at Tech Forward. Instead of the tense silence that had characterized Monica's staff meetings, there was an undercurrent of anticipation and excitement. "I know the past week has been full of surprises and changes," I began, standing at the front of the room with a presentation remote in my hand. "I want to take this opportunity to explain not just what we're doing differently, but why these changes will benefit everyone in this room." The first slide displayed employee satisfaction scores from the past 2 years, with a clear downward trend that had accelerated over the previous 6 months. Several people shifted uncomfortably in their seats, recognizing data that reflected their own experiences of frustration and diminished morale. These numbers tell a story about talented people who weren't being utilized effectively, I continued. But they also represent an opportunity. When we create an environment where everyone can contribute their best work, these scores don't just improve employee satisfaction, improves business results. The next slide showed client retention data, revenue per employee metrics, and innovation pipeline statistics. The correlation between declining employee satisfaction and stagnating business performance was clear and undeniable. Over the next 90 days, we'll be implementing changes in 5 key areas, I said, clicking to a slide that outlined the strategic initiatives. Flexible productivity standards that focus on results rather than hours logged. Collaborative. Project management that leverages diverse perspectives. Professional development opportunities that aren't limited by assumptions about availability or commitment. Innovation incentives that reward creative risk-taking. And advancement criteria that recognize different types of excellence. Jennifer Martinez, one of the junior associates who had been consistently overlooked for promotions despite strong performance, raised her hand tentatively. Ms. Chen, how will these changes affect people who are already on the advancement track? Under the current system? It was exactly the question I had expected, and the answer required delicate handling. Some employees had thrived under Monica's competitive, hierarchical approach, and they were understandably concerned about how the new collaborative model would affect their career trajectories. Excellence will still be recognized and rewarded, I assured her, but we'll be expanding our definition of what excellence looks like. Individual achievement will remain important, but we'll also value mentorship, collaborative problem-solving, and sustainable productivity. The goal isn't to limit anyone's opportunities, but to create more pathways for advancement. David Martinez, who had been one of Monica's favorites and had benefited from the competitive dynamic, looked skeptical. What about client relationships? Some of our biggest accounts expect a certain level of aggressive strategic thinking and rapid response capabilities. Won't these changes make us less competitive? The question went to the heart of the philosophical difference between the old and new approaches. Monica had built the department's reputation on reactive, high-pressure strategies that impressed clients with their intensity, but often burned out employees and created unsustainable working conditions. Our client feedback data actually suggests that sustainable, thoughtful, strategic approaches lead to better long-term relationships and higher satisfaction scores, I replied, clicking to a slide that displayed detailed client survey results. The accounts with the highest retention rates and revenue growth were managed by team members who took collaborative, relationship-focused approaches rather than purely competitive ones. Lisa Park, now sitting in the senior strategist section, added her perspective. I can speak to this directly. The clients I managed before my reassignment specifically requested to work with me again because they valued the collaborative approach and comprehensive strategic thinking. They weren't looking for someone to overpower their internal teams. They wanted a partner who could enhance their capabilities. The comment carried extra weight because everyone in the room knew that Lisa had been sidelined specifically because Monica believed her family responsibilities had diminished her client management abilities. Her vindication by client feedback was a powerful counter-narrative to the assumptions that had guided previous personnel decisions. As the meeting continued, I outlined specific programs that would launch over the coming weeks. Mentorship partnerships that would pair experienced team members with junior associates. Innovation time that would allow every employee to spend 10% of their work hours on creative projects. Flexible schedule options that would accommodate different productivity patterns and life circumstances. Professional development budgets that would support conference attendance, certification programs, and skill-building initiatives. I have one more announcement, I said as the formal presentation concluded. We'll be establishing a monthly team recognition program, but it won't just recognize individual achievement. We'll also be celebrating collaborative successes, mentorship excellence, and innovative problem-solving. The goal is to create an environment where everyone's contributions are valued and visible. After the meeting, small groups lingered in the conference room and spilled out into the hallway, engaged in animated discussions about the changes and their implications. The contrast with the subdued, cautious conversations that had typically followed Monica's staff meetings was striking, but not everyone was enthusiastic. As I gathered my materials and prepared to leave, I noticed Monica standing near the back of the room, having observed the entire presentation from a position that allowed her to gauge employee reactions. Her expression was carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in her posture and the way her hands gripped her notebook just slightly too tightly. "Impressive presentation," she said as I approached, her tone professionally cordial. "You've clearly put a lot of thought into these initiatives." "Thank you. I hope they'll benefit everyone, including you in your new role." I kept my response, equally professional, though I was curious about her real reaction to the comprehensive changes being implemented. Monica nodded slowly, her gaze moving around the room where employees were still engaged in excited conversations about the new programs. "It's certainly ambitious. I hope the execution matches the vision." There was something almost wistful in her tone, though whether it reflected regret about her own leadership approach or genuine skepticism about the viability of the changes was difficult to determine. Before I could respond, Amanda Foster approached with a stack of documents and an expression of barely contained enthusiasm. "Sarah, I've been working on the innovation program proposals over the weekend, and I think we can launch the first pilot project by the end of this week." The response from the team has been incredible already. 3 junior associates have submitted creative concepts that could revolutionize how we approach social media integration. The timing of Amanda's interruption was perfect, demonstrating exactly the kind of employee engagement and creative energy that the new initiatives were designed to foster. Monica observed the interaction with an expression that was increasingly difficult to read. "That's fantastic, Amanda. Let's schedule time this afternoon to review the proposals and discuss implementation timelines." I turned back to Monica, who had been watching our exchange with keen attention. "Monica, I'd love to get your input on these innovation initiatives as well. Your experience with campaign development could be valuable as we refine the program structure." The offer was genuine, though it also served a strategic purpose. By inviting Monica to contribute to the new initiatives rather than simply implementing them around her, I was providing an opportunity for her to become part of the solution rather than remaining a source of resistance. Monica's expression shifted, slightly surprise replacing the guarded neutrality she had maintained throughout our conversation. "I appreciate that, Sarah. I'd be happy to review the materials and offer feedback." As the crowd in the conference room began to disperse, I found myself reflecting on the complexity of the transformation that was taking place. Changing organizational culture required more than simply replacing leadership or implementing new policies. It required shifting fundamental assumptions about productivity, collaboration, and what constituted valuable contributions to team success. The afternoon brought a series of one-on-one meetings with employees who wanted to discuss how the changes would affect their specific roles and career trajectories. Each conversation revealed different aspects of the challenges that had developed under the previous management structure, as well as the untapped potential that existed throughout the team. Kevin Martinez, the creative strategist whose innovative campaigns had been consistently shelved, described feeling like his ideas had been systematically dismissed because they didn't fit Monica's preference for conventional approaches. I started keeping my more creative concepts to myself because it seemed like suggesting anything unconventional was seen as not understanding the business realities. Jennifer Thompson, the junior associate who had been passed over for promotions despite consistently strong performance, revealed that she had been actively job hunting because she saw no path for advancement under the existing structure. I was told that I needed to be more aggressive in meetings, more willing to compete directly with colleagues for visibility. But that's not how I work best, and it felt like I was being asked to change my fundamental personality to succeed here. Each story reinforced the data I had presented to the board months earlier. Talented people were being underutilized, creative potential was being wasted, and the competitive, hierarchical structure was actually limiting the department's capabilities rather than enhancing them. But the most revealing conversation came at the end of the day, when Lisa Park stopped by my office to discuss her transition into the senior client strategy director role. She had spent the afternoon reviewing files for the accounts she would be managing, and her analysis had uncovered some concerning patterns. "Sarah, I need to show you something," Lisa said, settling into one of the visitor chairs with a thick folder of client communications. "3 of the accounts I'm inheriting have been expressing dissatisfaction with our strategic approach over the past 6 months. The complaints are remarkably consistent. They feel like we've been prioritizing short-term metrics over long-term, relationship building." She opened the folder and spread out printed emails and meeting notes that painted a troubling picture. Clients who had been loyal to Tech Forward for years were questioning whether the marketing department understood their evolving needs and industry challenges. "The Peterson Group situation is even worse than I initially realized," Lisa continued. "They didn't just reduce their contract because of budget constraints. They've been systematically dissatisfied with our strategic recommendations for over a year, and those concerns were apparently never addressed at the senior level." The information was concerning but not entirely surprising. Monica's approach to client management had focused heavily on impressive presentations and aggressive growth targets, but the client feedback suggested that substance and relationship management had been sacrificed in favor of short-term wins. "What's your assessment of our ability to rebuild these relationships?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Lisa was quiet for a moment, reviewing the documents spread across my desk. "It's going to require a fundamental shift in how we engage with clients. Less focus on selling them strategies, more focus on understanding their challenges and collaborating on solutions. It's definitely possible, but it will take time and consistent effort." "That sounds exactly like the kind of strategic thinking." "That convinced me you were the right person for this role," I replied. "What do you need to make it happen?" The conversation that followed outlined a comprehensive client relationship rehabilitation plan that would require additional resources, extended timelines, and a completely different approach to account management. But it also demonstrated exactly why the changes we were implementing were necessary not just for employee satisfaction, but for business sustainability. As Lisa gathered her materials and prepared to leave, she paused at the door with an expression that mixed gratitude and determination. "Sarah, I want you to know that this opportunity means more to me than just a career advancement. For the past 2 years, I felt like I was disappearing professionally, like my contributions didn't matter anymore. Today, for the first time in months, I feel like I'm using my brain again." After Lisa left, I remained at my desk reviewing the client files and strategic documents that would guide our efforts over the coming weeks. The challenges were significant, but they were also precisely the kind of problems that the collaborative, relationship-focused approach we were implementing was designed to address. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. "How's the revolution going? Emma keeps asking when Mama is coming home to tell her about work." I smiled, thinking about my daughter's curious questions about what Mommy did at the office all day. Soon, I would be able to tell her stories about helping people achieve their potential, building relationships that lasted, and creating workplaces where everyone could contribute their best efforts. The marketing department was quiet now, but the energy of transformation was still palpable in the empty corridors and darkened offices. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities to prove that the changes we were implementing could deliver both improved employee satisfaction and stronger business results. Monica's workstation was empty, her computer screen dark, but the stack of innovation program materials I had left for her review was gone. Whether she would engage constructively with the new initiatives or continue to resist the cultural transformation remained to be seen. But tonight, the momentum was clearly building toward something genuinely different. As I gathered my belongings and prepared to leave, I reflected on how much had changed in just 1 week. The woman who had been dismissed as a casualty of work-life balance was now leading a comprehensive transformation of corporate culture and, strategic approach. The employees who had been demoralized and underutilized were now engaged in collaborative efforts to rebuild client relationships and develop innovative solutions. The real test would come in the months ahead, as the initiatives we had launched either succeeded in improving both employee satisfaction and business performance, or failed in ways that would validate the skepticism of those who believed that sustainable, collaborative approaches were incompatible with competitive success. But tonight, driving home through Austin traffic to a house where my family was waiting to hear about the day's developments, I felt confident that we had built a foundation for something genuinely transformative. The revolution was no longer just beginning, it was gaining momentum, creating ripple effects that would extend far beyond the marketing department and ultimately reshape how tech-forward solutions approached leadership, employee development, and client relationships. 6 months had passed since that transformative Monday morning when I walked back into tech-forward solutions carrying secrets that would reshape an entire corporate culture. The autumn sunlight streaming through my corner office windows illuminated quarterly reports that told a story of unprecedented success. Client satisfaction scores had increased by 47%. Employee retention had reached an all-time high of 94%, and revenue per employee had grown by 32% while maintaining sustainable work-life integration standards that had become a model for other companies in the industry. The marketing department bore little resemblance to the hierarchical, competitive environment that had existed under Monica's leadership. Open collaborative spaces had replaced isolated cubicles, innovation labs buzzed with creative energy from employees who had been given time and resources to explore unconventional solutions, and the morning stand-up meetings had evolved into dynamic strategy sessions where junior associates regularly presented ideas that were implemented at the executive level. Lisa Park knocked on my office door, carrying a tablet and wearing the confident expression of someone who had fully stepped into her potential as Senior Client Strategy Director. Over the past 6 months, she had not only salvaged the deteriorating relationships with our major accounts but had also secured 3 new multi-million-dollar contracts by demonstrating the kind of collaborative strategic thinking that clients were increasingly seeking in an industry saturated with aggressive, short-term approaches. "Sarah, I have the final numbers from the Peterson Group renewal meeting," Lisa said, settling into the visitor chair with barely contained excitement. "They've not only restored their original contract level, but they want to expand our engagement by 60% and bring us in as strategic partners for their entire digital transformation initiative." The news was remarkable on multiple levels. The Peterson Group had been on the verge of terminating their relationship with TechForward when I took over the department, frustrated by years of what they perceived as superficial strategic recommendations that prioritized impressive presentations over substantive collaboration. Their decision to not only remain, but dramatically expand the partnership represented a validation of everything we had been working to accomplish. "That's incredible, Lisa. What was their feedback about the new approach?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer from the dozens of similar conversations we had experienced over the past months. Lisa scrolled through her notes, her smile growing wider as she reviewed the client comments. They specifically mentioned feeling like true partners rather than recipients of pre-packaged solutions. The collaborative workshops we implemented allowed their internal teams to contribute insights that fundamentally improved the strategic recommendations. They said it was the first time they felt like a marketing consulting firm actually understood their business challenges, rather than just trying to sell them services. The transformation in client relationships had been one of the most dramatic and measurable impacts of our cultural shift. By empowering employees to think strategically, rather than just execute predetermined approaches, we had created an environment where innovative solutions emerged from collaboration rather than competition. The results spoke for themselves in both client satisfaction scores and contract renewals that exceeded every previous benchmark. Amanda Foster appeared in the doorway, her arms full of presentation materials, and her expression radiating the kind of enthusiasm that had become characteristic. Of the innovation initiatives she now led as Director of Creative Strategy. Over the past 6 months, Amanda had developed and launched 12 pilot programs that had generated new revenue streams while allowing employees to explore creative approaches that had been systematically discouraged under the previous management. Structure. Sarah, I need to show you the latest results from the Innovation Incubator program, Amanda said, spreading colorful charts and graphs across my desk. We've had 43 employees participate in creative projects during their innovation time, and 7 of those projects have been developed into client offerings that are generating revenue. More importantly, employee satisfaction scores for participants are averaging 97%. The Innovation Incubator had been one of the most ambitious initiatives we implemented, allowing every employee to dedicate 10% of their work time to creative projects that might or might not have immediate commercial applications. Critics, including Monica during the early implementation phase, had argued that the program was an expensive distraction that would reduce overall productivity and create unrealistic expectations about work responsibilities. Instead, the program had become a talent development engine that identified creative capabilities throughout the organization while generating unexpected solutions to long-standing client challenges. Employees who had been pigeonholed in narrow roles discovered they had skills and interests that could contribute to completely different aspects of the business, creating cross-functional collaboration that strengthened every department. The most interesting development, Amanda continued, is that 3 of the most successful projects came from employees who had been considered underperformers under the previous evaluation system. It turns out they weren't lacking motivation or capability, they just weren't being utilized in ways that matched their strengths. Jennifer Martinez, the junior associate who had been consistently passed over for advancement opportunities, had used her innovation time to develop a social media integration strategy that had revolutionized how tech-forward approached digital client engagement. Her project had generated over $2 million in new business while establishing her as one of the department's most valuable strategic thinkers. Kevin Martinez, whose creative campaign concepts had been repeatedly shelved for being too unconventional, had created an interactive client presentation system that allowed real-time collaboration during strategy meetings. The system had been adopted by 5 other departments and was being licensed to external companies, creating an entirely new revenue stream. Most significantly, David Chen, a data analyst who had been relegated to routine reporting tasks, had developed a predictive client satisfaction model that could identify relationship problems months before they became contract cancellations. His innovation project had already prevented the loss of 4 major accounts, while providing strategic insights that informed every aspect of our client management approach. These results validate everything we believed about untapped potential in our workforce, I said, reviewing Amanda's comprehensive analysis of the program impacts. Have you documented these successes in a way that could be presented to other departments? Amanda nodded enthusiastically. I've been working with HR to develop a company-wide implementation plan. The finance department is particularly interested because they've seen how our innovation projects have generated measurable ROI while improving employee engagement scores. As Amanda gathered her materials and prepared to leave, I reflected on how dramatically the conversation about employee potential had shifted over the past 6 months. Instead of focusing on limitations and constraints, we were now identifying capabilities and opportunities that had been systematically overlooked under the competitive, hierarchical approach that had previously defined corporate culture. The afternoon brought a meeting that I had been anticipating with both curiosity and some apprehension. Monica had requested time to discuss her role transition and what she described as important observations about the department's evolution. Over the past 6 months, she had gradually adapted to her new position, contributing to strategic projects while learning to collaborate rather than dominate in team settings. Monica entered my office at precisely 3 o'clock, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing an expression that was more thoughtful than I had seen from her in our previous interactions. She had changed during the months since our roles reversed, becoming more reflective and less immediately defensive about challenges to her previous approaches. Sarah, thank you for making time for this conversation, Monica began, settling into the visitor chair with a composure that seemed genuinely relaxed rather than carefully constructed. I wanted to discuss some observations I've made about the changes in our department and their implications for my own professional development. The opening was unexpected, focused on learning and growth rather than criticism or resistance. Over the past months, I had watched Monica struggle with the transition from authoritative leader to collaborative team member, but recently her contributions to projects had become genuinely valuable rather than merely tolerated. I'd be interested to hear your perspective, I replied, curious about what insights she might have developed from experiencing the cultural transformation from a completely different vantage point. Monica opened her portfolio and pulled out several pages of handwritten notes, her preparation evident in the organized thoughts she had clearly spent time developing. I've been reflecting on the differences between the leadership approach I used and the methods you've implemented, and I think I'm beginning to understand why the results have been so dramatically different. She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts before continuing. When I was in the leadership position, I believed that creating competitive pressure and maintaining hierarchical authority were necessary for driving high performance. I thought that accommodating personal circumstances, particularly family responsibilities, would inevitably compromise professional excellence. The admission was remarkable in its directness and self-awareness. Monica had rarely acknowledged that her previous approaches might have been flawed, let alone engaged in the kind of systematic analysis that her comments suggested. What I've observed over the past 6 months, she continued, is that the collaborative approach has actually generated higher performance levels while creating more sustainable working conditions. The employees who I thought were being soft by prioritizing work-life balance have consistently delivered more innovative solutions and stronger client relationships than the competitive approach ever achieved. I remained quiet, recognizing that Monica was working through insights that represented a fundamental shift in her understanding of leadership and productivity. The woman who had once dismissed my potential because of motherhood was now analyzing why family-friendly, collaborative approaches had produced superior business results. Lisa Park is the clearest example, Monica said, referring to the employee she had demoted after Lisa became a mother. Under my leadership, I marginalized her contributions because I believed her family responsibilities would compromise her professional focus. But as Senior Client Strategy Director, she's managing our most challenging accounts more effectively than anyone in the department's history. Monica pulled out client satisfaction data that she had apparently compiled independently, comparing current performance metrics with historical results from when she had managed the same accounts. The contrast was stark and undeniable. Every measurable indicator of client relationship health had improved dramatically under Lisa's collaborative approach. I think I was fundamentally wrong about what drives exceptional performance, Monica continued, her tone becoming more reflective. I believed that success required total dedication, meaning that any commitment outside of work would necessarily diminish professional capabilities. But the data suggests that diverse life experiences actually enhance strategic thinking and client relationship management. The conversation continued for over an hour, with Monica systematically analyzing various aspects of the department's transformation and her evolving understanding of effective leadership. She had clearly spent considerable time reviewing performance data, employee feedback, and client satisfaction scores, approaching the analysis with the same thoroughness she had once applied to competitive strategic planning. I have a request, Monica said as our conversation began to wind down. I'd like to enroll in the executive development program that the company offers for emerging leaders. I think I need to fundamentally rebuild my understanding of management and team development. The request was unexpected and significant. The executive development program was intensive and expensive, typically reserved for employees who were being groomed for senior leadership positions. For Monica to request participation suggested that she was genuinely committed to changing her approach rather than simply adapting to current circumstances. I think that's an excellent idea, I replied. Your experience transitioning from hierarchical to collaborative leadership could actually be valuable for other managers who are facing similar challenges. Have you considered whether you might want to mentor other leaders who are working on similar transformations? Monica's expression brightened with interest. I hadn't thought about that possibility, but you're right that my perspective might be useful. I've made most of the mistakes that managers make when they're trying to maintain control rather than develop their teams. As Monica gathered her materials and prepared to leave, she paused at the door with an expression that mixed gratitude and something that might have been regret. Sarah, I need to acknowledge something that I should have said months ago. I was wrong about motherhood affecting your professional capabilities. I was wrong about work-life balance compromising performance. I was wrong about most of my assumptions, about what creates exceptional teams and sustainable success. The apology was direct and comprehensive, addressing not just the specific comments that had motivated my 18-month strategic planning process, but the broader philosophical differences that had made our previous working relationship so difficult. I appreciate you saying that, Monica. But more importantly, I appreciate that you've been willing to engage with these changes constructively, rather than just resisting them. The department is stronger because you've contributed your experience and insights to our collaborative approach. After Monica left, I spent some time reviewing the quarterly reports that would be presented to the board the following week. The numbers told a compelling story of transformation. Employee satisfaction scores that had increased every month for 6 consecutive months. Client retention rates that exceeded industry standards. Innovation metrics that had positioned tech forward as a thought leader in creative marketing solutions, and revenue growth that had been achieved while maintaining sustainable work-life integration standards. But beyond the quantitative measures, the qualitative changes were even more significant. The marketing department had evolved from a competitive, hierarchical environment where employees competed for visibility and advancement opportunities into a collaborative ecosystem where diverse perspectives were valued and creative solutions emerged from team efforts rather than individual brilliance. Rachel knocked on my door with the afternoon's correspondence, including several interview requests from business publications that were interested in documenting the tech-forward transformation as a case study in sustainable leadership practices. Over the past months, our approach had attracted attention from other companies that were struggling with similar challenges around employee retention, innovation stagnation, and client relationship management. Ms. Chen, Harvard Business School, has requested a meeting to discuss developing a case study about the department's transformation, Rachel said, handing me a formal letter from the university's Management Research Division. They're particularly interested in the measurable impacts of family-friendly policies on business performance. The academic interest was flattering, but also represented an opportunity to influence broader conversations about leadership, productivity, and the false choice between career success and family responsibilities. If our experience at Tech Forward could provide data that challenged conventional assumptions about corporate culture, the impact could extend far beyond our own company. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom. Emma's first word today was, meeting. I think she's been listening to too many of your work calls. I smiled, thinking about my 15-month-old daughter who was now walking, talking, and demonstrating the kind of curiosity about the world that reminded me daily why creating more inclusive, sustainable workplaces mattered so much. The late tea afternoon brought one final meeting that would provide a perfect conclusion to the day's conversations about transformation and growth. Jennifer Thompson, who had taken the risk of hiring me despite the unconventional circumstances, had scheduled time to discuss the board's assessment of the marketing department's performance and their interest in expanding the collaborative leadership model to other areas of the company. Jennifer entered my office carrying a folder of documents and wearing the satisfied expression of someone whose strategic gamble had paid off spectacularly. Over the past 6 months, she had fielded questions from other board members, defended, the decision to make such dramatic leadership changes and presented quarterly results that had exceeded every projected outcome. Sarah, I wanted to personally deliver the board's formal evaluation of your performance during your first 6 months as Chief Marketing Officer, Jennifer said, settling into the visitor chair with obvious pleasure. The results have exceeded our most optimistic projections in every measurable category. She opened the folder and pulled out a comprehensive performance analysis that documented not just the quantitative improvements in client satisfaction, employee retention, and revenue generation, but also the qualitative changes in corporate culture, innovation pipeline development, and external industry recognition that had positioned Tech Forward as a leader in sustainable business practices. The board is particularly impressed with the client feedback we've received, Jennifer continued, showing me survey results and testimonial letters from major accounts. The Peterson Group specifically mentioned that their partnership with Tech Forward has become a model for how they evaluate other vendor relationships. They've referred 3 new clients to us based on their experience with our collaborative approach. The client referrals represented validation that went beyond simple satisfaction with services provided. When major corporations began using Tech Forward's approach as a benchmark for evaluating other partnerships, it suggested that our methods had created genuinely differentiated value in a competitive marketplace. But the most significant impact, Jennifer said, has been on our ability to attract and retain exceptional talent. Our employee satisfaction scores are now among the highest in the industry, and we're receiving applications from senior-level professionals who specifically want to work in our collaborative environment. The talent attraction component had been an unexpected but tremendously valuable outcome of the cultural transformation. As word spread through professional networks about Tech Forward's approach to work-life integration and collaborative leadership, experienced professionals who had been frustrated with traditional corporate hierarchies began seeking opportunities to join our team. The board has unanimously approved expanding your leadership model to other departments, Jennifer continued, pulling out organizational charts that showed proposed structural changes throughout the company. We'd like you to work with department heads in finance, operations, and business development to implement similar collaborative approaches while maintaining the accountability standards that have made your transformation so successful. The expansion opportunity was both exciting and daunting. Replicating the marketing department's success in other areas of the company would require adapting the collaborative model to different types of work while maintaining the core principles that had driven our exceptional results. I'd be honored to take on that responsibility, I replied, but I think it's important to acknowledge that sustainable change requires buy-in from existing leadership rather than just top-down mandates. The transformation worked in marketing, partly because the previous approach was clearly creating problems that needed to be addressed. Jennifer nodded thoughtfully. That's exactly the kind of strategic thinking that convinced us you were the right person for this expansion. We're not looking to simply replicate your specific methods, but to adapt your principles to different operational contexts while ensuring that the changes are sustainable and measurable. As our meeting concluded, Jennifer handed me a final document that represented the ultimate validation of everything we had accomplished over the past 6 months. Tech Forward Solutions had been selected as one of Fortune magazine's best companies for working mothers, with specific recognition for our innovative approaches to leadership development, work-life integration, and sustainable productivity practices. The article will be published next month, Jennifer said with obvious pride. They specifically mentioned that Tech Forward demonstrates how family-friendly policies can enhance rather than compromise business performance. I believe they quoted, "Your approach as revolutionary proof that supporting working mothers creates competitive advantages rather than accommodation burdens." After Jennifer left, I remained at my desk as the Austin skyline began to twinkle with evening lights, reflecting on the journey that had brought me from devastated former employee to recognized industry leader in sustainable corporate culture. The woman who had been dismissed as a casualty of work-life balance was now being featured in national publications as an example of how motherhood could enhance rather than limit professional capabilities. But the most meaningful validation came in the daily experiences of employees who had been empowered to contribute their full potential, clients who had benefited from collaborative strategic thinking, and the gradual shift in industry conversations about what constituted effective leadership in an increasingly complex business environment. Lisa Park appeared in my doorway, having finished her client calls for the day and preparing to leave for her daughter's school soccer game. 6 months earlier, she had been relegated to social media management because Monica believed that family responsibilities compromised professional focus. Today, she was managing our most strategic client relationships while maintaining the kind of work-life integration that had made her both a better mother and a more effective strategist. "Sarah, I just wanted to thank you again for believing in my capabilities when I had almost stopped believing in them myself," Lisa said, her voice carrying genuine emotion. "This opportunity has changed not just my career trajectory, but my entire family's quality of life." Amanda Foster stopped by a few minutes later, carrying her laptop bag and wearing the confident expression of someone who was rushing home to help her son with homework while feeling completely fulfilled by her professional contributions. The innovation programs she had developed were now being studied by other companies as models for employee development and creative problem-solving. I keep thinking about how different things could have been if these opportunities had existed when I was struggling to balance work and family responsibilities years ago, Amanda said. The employees who benefit from these programs in the future won't have to choose between career advancement and family involvement the way so many of us did. As the marketing department gradually emptied for the evening, I gathered my materials and prepared to leave for home, where Tom and Emma were waiting to hear about the day's developments. The transformation that had begun with my own experience of discrimination had evolved into something much larger, a comprehensive reimagining of how successful organizations could operate while supporting the full lives of their employees. Monica's workstation was empty, but I noticed that she had left materials for the executive development program on her desk, along with notes about potential mentorship opportunities with other managers who were transitioning to collaborative leadership approaches. The woman who had once dismissed working mothers as professionally compromised was now preparing to help other leaders understand why inclusive approaches created better business results. The drive home through Austin traffic gave me time to process the magnitude of what had been accomplished over the past 6 months. When I had first conceived the plan to return to Tech Forward in a position of authority, the motivation had been largely personal, proving that Monica's assumptions about motherhood and career potential were wrong while demonstrating my own capabilities in a leadership role. But the transformation had become something far more significant than personal vindication. The collaborative leadership model we had implemented was now being studied and replicated by other organizations, influencing industry-wide conversations about productivity, innovation, and sustainable business practices. The employees who had been empowered to contribute their full potential were now mentoring others and spreading collaborative approaches throughout their professional networks. Most importantly, the cultural shift had created an environment where the next generation of employees wouldn't have to choose between career success and family responsibilities. Emma would grow up in a world where working mothers were recognized as strategic assets rather than accommodation burdens, where diverse life experiences were valued as sources of innovative thinking, and where collaborative leadership was understood to be more effective than competitive hierarchies. As I pulled into my driveway and saw the warm lights of home, I thought about the conversation I would have with Emma when she was old enough to understand the choices her mother had made and the changes those choices had created. I would tell her about a time when motherhood was seen as incompatible with professional success, and how a group of determined women had proven that assumption wrong through measurable results and sustained excellence. The temporary consultant badge that had concealed my true intentions 18 months earlier was now framed in my office, a reminder of how dramatically circumstances could change when someone refused to accept limitations imposed by others. Assumptions. Monica's prediction that motherhood would ruin my career had become the motivation for proving that family responsibilities could actually enhance strategic thinking, collaborative problem-solving, and sustainable leadership approaches. The revolution had succeeded beyond every projected outcome, creating ripple effects that extended far beyond tech-forward solutions to influence industry standards, academic research, and the daily experiences of working parents throughout the corporate world. But perhaps the most satisfying aspect of the transformation was watching Monica evolve from dismissive critic to collaborative contributor, demonstrating that even deeply held assumptions about leadership and productivity could be changed through consistent results and sustained commitment to inclusive approaches. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities to expand the collaborative leadership model to other departments. But tonight, I was content to return home to my family, knowing that everything we had accomplished was ultimately about creating a better world for the next generation of working parents who would never have to choose between career success and family fulfillment. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.